From the Mumbai studios of Republic TV, it's time for Arnab Goswami on the debate.
Arnab Goswami on the debate at 10, powered by Century Pro Wood and Panasonic.
And good evening and welcome back. Dear viewers of the debate, the conspirators have been trying to get into your mind. They have spent millions, in fact billions, investing money in small so-called digital news sites in India. Then these so-called news sites plant negative stories about India. And what do they say and what happens? Let me tell you both. They said that millions of Indian farmers will die. Well, they didn't. In fact, if you remember in 2020, 2021, they said, you will die. They said there was a 50% chance that you will die of COVID under Prime Minister Modi. Well, you didn't. You're still here. You're watching my program. Then they said that Indian vaccines will certainly kill you if you dare to use them. And if you don't use Pfizer, particularly some of them loved Pfizer. Did the Indian vaccines kill you? They didn't. They kept you safe. What else did they say? They said all workers in India will turn homeless migrants without a home and without food, and then there will be a civil war in India during the COVID period. Where is the civil war? There wasn't one. And no, I'm not hyping a thing tonight. I'm just reminding you, viewers, on this, the nation's sharpest opinion of what they said and what happened. And I'm saying this to you with an intuitive pre-warning for the future. And let me continue. They said millions of farmers have died and are dying. They didn't. They said Kashmir will just burn after 370 goes. It didn't. They said every Muslim in India will lose his or her citizenship. They haven't. They said all Muslims in India will be asked to show papers if they want to remain Indian. They weren't. Not a single Muslim was made to show papers. But these shameless people, they don't stop, do they? They don't stop. They don't learn their lessons. They don't change their act. They're like one-trick ponies, ladies and gentlemen. They said India will lose Ladakh. We didn't. They said that under Narendra Modi's prime ministership, communal riots will increase. No, they substantially went down. What else did they say, viewers? They said that India's economy will be completely consumed by China, eaten up by the United States on statistical terms of per day, per month, per year growth. We are far ahead of America and far ahead of China. They also said that our neighbors will hate us. Well, just about a couple of weeks back, Jaishankar flew down to Colombo and India rescued the Sri Lankan economy. Do the Sri Lankans hate us? No, the Sri Lankans love us. They said our army would weaken, and we are today one of the world's fastest growing defense exporters. We must remember everything they said. We must not let these issues suddenly move away. We must remind ourselves every single day of what they told us would happen. They said that the Muslim world will isolate India. As I said on the 26th of January, the United Arab Emirates, Bangladesh and Egypt have sent marching contingents to our Republic Day parade with President Draupadi Murmu taking the salute this time. So whatever they say today must be kept in the context of the past, and whatever they may say tomorrow must be kept in the context of the lies they are putting out tonight. They also said, therefore, and now I come to the point, that the Life Insurance Corporation of India will collapse. It hasn't. It's fine. We all have LIC policies. They said Adani will go bankrupt. Well, the stock went up 20%, I'm told today. They said SBI will come down. The State Bank of India and the entire Indian banking system will be destroyed forever. Ladies and gentlemen, SBI is rocking. And I have just one question to ask you tonight before I go to my next guest. Will you spare these people? Will you spare the conspirators at least a solid grilling in response? I say, ladies and gentlemen, time to grill them to perfection. The conspirators unable to get into your mind and trying to run away now and hide shall be caught by me in their tracks, dragged back onto the program and grilled live tonight for your viewing pleasure. But before that, joining me is Professor, very famous across India for the last few months. I haven't spoken to him, but a distinct pleasure to introduce controversial, much talked about, very trending Professor Salvatore Babones. He's an assistant professor at the University of Sydney. He teaches sociology, which, by the way, Professor Salvatore Babones was also the subject of my bachelor's degree, and I went on to do my master's in social anthropology, so we have some connection there. He has a very keen interest in Indian politics, and I love his opinions on the media, on the lobby, etc. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my mic. But welcome, Professor Babones. Let me get straight to the matter. Great to have you on the show, first of all, tonight.
Thank you, and please don't grill anyone alive on my account.
No. I do it for a living. I just love doing it. That's all I do. But yesterday you said that I don't see what the big deal is about Adani, and you called it a fact of life in market capitalism. So why is it that everybody, including the Western media, was going gaga with these doomsday theories? What do you make of it, given what you've said now and your present analysis on the subject?
Look, I'm a comparative sociologist, not a market analyst. But as a comparative sociologist who specializes in development, all you have to do is look at other countries to get some idea of what a normal or ordinary level of volatility is for a major company. So, for example, I live in Australia, but I'm American. If you look at the last couple of years on the U.S. stock markets, we've seen many companies lose similar amounts of market value as Adani has lost, which is to say that Adani has gone back about 1 year. Its main flagship vehicle has gone back 1 year in terms of its market gains. Well, we saw that happen in the last couple of years to companies like Disney, Microsoft, Netflix, Meta, Facebook. For that matter, I'm invested broadly in the NASDAQ stock index. The NASDAQ index has lost all of its gains from the past couple of years, and my own stock portfolio is back to where it was in 2020. So these kind of stock movements are simply ordinary in large companies across developed countries, to say nothing of developing countries like India. The Adani share price decline is a private misfortune, not a public emergency.
Yeah, so I first of all totally agree with that. On your comparison on Disney, Netflix, Facebook, Meta, you can also add Amazon, you can also add so many others who have not just been losing market value, market cap, but who have been sacking tens of thousands of people just in the last few weeks. But it's not a political debate in the US. It's a reality of the way the business environment is. Of sometimes companies tend to bloat up, tend to get their predictions wrong, and then they correct. And that's what business is about, isn't it, Professor Babones? You know, all these big tech companies have made huge mistakes in assessing where their fortunes will go post-COVID. Now they are sort of fixing things. So I'm still figuring out. Let me ask you, what was the big deal? I mean, is there something else going on here that we are not reading on the face of it?
Well, again, I always encourage people to put things in comparative perspective. So, for example, consider the question of Life Insurance Corporation of India being invested in Adani and having lost money on that investment in the last few weeks. That may be true, but it's entirely appropriate for a long-term investor like a life insurance company to be invested in relatively illiquid securities that are in something like a family company or in a closely held company. That is, insurance companies hold what we call patient capital. The idea of this kind of investing is that they can invest for a very long term, which is to say they have their investments match the maturity profile, the maturation profile of their insurance policies, which mature over periods of 20 or 30 years. So what Life Insurance Corporation of India will be looking to do is have investments that can be realized over a time frame of 20 or 30 years, not in making a quick buck in the market, which is to say institutional investors, large long-term investors like insurance companies, whether publicly or privately owned, have an investment time horizon that's much longer than what we're seeing with this current market volatility. Now, the drop in Adani's share price will be a serious problem for many people, not least Mr. Gautam Adani himself. But that doesn't make it a national emergency. It's simply a matter of market volatility that we would see anywhere in the world. I might add that even the share price structure of Adani, which was such a focus of the Hindenburg Research Report, even that is not particularly atypical. That is, if you look at Europe's largest company, LVMH, most of you know it as Louis Vuitton, Bernard Arnault and the Arnault family own almost half of the company. They own more than 60% of the voting shares. They have 60 subsidiaries in which they own various proportions in it, and members of the family serve in the company. Now, I'm not promoting that as a model of corporate governance. As a sociologist, I'm not here to promote any model of corporate governance. I'd just like to educate people on the fact that these forms of corporate governance are widespread in the developed world as well as in India.
But Professor, both you and I, as sociologists, need to also perhaps look at another matter, which is that if you turn the clock back maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, it appears to me, and I'll just take a while to elaborate this, and then I'd like your views on this, that these are not one-offs. You see, these are not one-offs. There is a pattern to it, and the pattern that I see is that there is an attempt to bring the widest possible group of people into a polarized and frenzied, volatile state. And now let me elaborate. During the CAA campaign, all Muslims, if you can provoke and polarize and anger or create insecurities among the largest Muslim population in the world, which is there in India, then you can create havoc in India. Similarly, all farmers, I take you back, Greta Thunberg toolkit issue, January 2021. If you can genuinely create disaffection among farmers as a group, then you've got this tinderbox situation happening all over India. Similarly, or certain consolidated caste groups. You know, if you can get certain backward caste groups together, if you can create a Muslim caste consolidation, then you've got this tinderbox situation. Then if you can provoke them, and if you can create some riots in India, and then use the media to question the legitimacy of the government itself, which has been duly elected, you've got a tinderbox situation. And finally, in this case, the closest that one came to it, Professor Salvatore, was LIC. Because, you know, you ask every second middle-class person in the country, they'll say, yes, I have an LIC policy. I have an LIC policy. You, SBI, so when you say we are for all SBI and LIC, you know, investors and bank account holders and shareholders, and you're going to collapse, then you've got a vast group. So my question to you is, do you believe that there has been, it is all happening innocently? That somebody is saying, let's get all Muslims and provoke them. Let's get all LIC, SBI account holders and provoke them. Let's get all farmers and provoke them. Let's get consolidated caste groups and provoke them. Or is there some mind somewhere? Is there some planning somewhere? Is it possible that there is a structured internal and international conspiracy to get certain groups into a state of frenzy and insecurity in the country?
I can't tell you whether or not there's a conspiracy. What I can tell you is that if there is a conspiracy, it's not working. And we have pretty good social science data on that. So, for example, on the farmer protests, we have pretty good data that the farmer protests were not representative of India's farmers. In fact, the protesting farmers in Haryana and Punjab were among the richest farmers in India. Similarly, with the CAA protests, we're aware that most Muslims, well over 90% of India's Muslims, feel that they are free to practice their religion in India. And in fact, rates of discrimination perceived by India's Muslims are well below the rates of discrimination perceived in the United States by African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans. That is to say, Asian Americans, Asians in the United States, report higher levels of self-reported discrimination against themselves than India's Muslims report in India. And this is on the basis of very solid social science data coming out of the Pew Research Center. So I can't tell you what people are trying to do for political purposes, but I can tell you that this kind of existential crisis account of politics simply doesn't match with the data we're seeing coming out of India.
But I'm not sure if this is the end of it. I'm sure this will continue, because if there is a conspiracy, they will always look for the next chapter. But also people, Professor, who after the 2014 elections and after the 2019 elections actually wrote op-eds in certain Latvian newspapers saying that the voting masses should not matter. The voting masses do not know what is good for India. They have elected Narendra Modi, but we, the classes, think that Modi is not good for India. The voting classes of the country do not know what is good for India, and hence they went on to actually try to make an academic argument that electoral democracy cannot be the only solution for India's governance issues. They advocated for something they called participative democracy, which behind the flowery language essentially means creating riots, creating some localized anarchy, a subversive attitude. So they call it participative democracy. Given those commentaries that were made and are still being made about electoral democracy not being good for India, like elections are not good if you end up electing Modi. How do you view all these events, the last 2-3 years particularly, given that kind of a thrust which was there post Modi's becoming Prime Minister?
Well, since you and I are both partisan sociologists, let me just say that the political science profession has been making these arguments for about 2,500 years. Since the time of Aristotle, there's been the claim that true democracy does not consist in people voting. And that's right there in Aristotle's Politics. I don't know the ancient Indian writing on this, but I'm sure there's probably something to find there as well. More seriously, politics is not about existential crises. Everything is not Weimar Germany in 1932 on the edge of the abyss. Politics are about fighting hard for things you want for your country. Now, in the United States, we have the same sorts of existential crisis politics that you're seeing in India. The difference is, in America, most people don't take that very seriously. Yeah, we hear the heat, we hear the talk, but what we really want are the issues. If you want to have a Democratic president, you know you're going to get higher taxes and larger government services. If you have a Republican president, you know you're going to get a tax cut, but also probably some cuts in government services. What India really needs to mature as a democracy is a robust opposition that presents a policy platform that clearly separates it, clearly distinguishes it from the BJP at the national level. Now, opposition parties are doing that at the state level. In India, there's robust political opposition at the state level, with opposition parties presenting clear policy alternatives to the BJP, and as often as not, winning against the BJP. Unfortunately, I don't see that same kind of clear policy choice being offered at the national level in India. When that policy choice is offered, and hopefully it will be next year in the 2024 elections, India will have a much more robust, much more genuine political debate.
Lastly, Professor, you've tried to explain in one of your articles, recent articles, the reason for anti-Indianism, which exists very strongly in the West.
Right.
Do you think that some of the responses on the Hindenburg report on Adani could be motivated by such underlying sentiments? Because I cannot understand for the life of me, how certain media in the West fell for the Hindenburg report when when the Hindenburg report is under investigation for the US Department of Justice since 2021 for illegal trade tactics. So the Hindenburg has no credibility, and yet, certain section for the media, because it suited the anti-Modi narrative, really amplified it.
Hindenburg Research is not a research organization.
It's
a
not.
hedge fund.
Exactly.
It's a hedge fund run by an investor named Nathan Anderson, a very successful investor, I might add. It's actually named for the 1937 airship disaster when the Hindenburg crashed and burned, killing 36 people in my home state of New Jersey. That crash and burn ethic is exactly what Hindenburg is all about. Now, they identified Adani as being potentially overvalued. Again, I'm not an investment analyst. Perhaps Adani was overvalued. I really can't speak to that. But what they did was release a report with the clear and avowed intention, you don't even have to read between the lines, to talk down Adani's stock price at a time when they had sold short Adani stock. I mean, their report says that Adani is, quote, the most egregious example of corporate fraud in history, unquote. That's Hindenburg, not me saying that. Now, again, I don't know the truth of that. I keep saying what I'm not. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not an investment advisor.
But my question was not on Hindenburg. My question was on how did Bloomberg or New York Times or Washington Post or all the rest of the media, the global media, take Hindenburg so seriously in this context? How could anyone take that seriously?
Looking at, if we look back at Enron in 2001, which was, a complete write-off of the entire company, that was a highly politically connected company in the United States, close to the Bush administration, to say that anything we're seeing in India comes close to the Enron fiasco of 2001, I think is it's a lapse of memory. It's simply not remembering our own history in the United States.
Well, I really loved your take as a political sociologist on Adani and its possible fallouts. I look forward to catching up with you again soon, Professor Salvatore. Thank you very much.
I'm leaving for India in the morning.
Well, I'll see you in Mumbai. See you in Mumbai then. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Salvatore from Sydney, ladies and gentlemen. And